This tale unfolds in 1864, during the Second Scholastic War. Meet John, his wife Marie, their son Creston, and John's brother Peter, all hailing from Denmark. They embark on a life-altering journey to the United States. Their plan is straightforward: secure seats on a stagecoach to their new home. However, there's a surprising twist when Peter, John's brother, decides to stay behind in Denmark. As they settle into the stagecoach, an unexpected turn of events occurs. A stranger unexpectedly appears and asks another couple to vacate their seats. The couple complies, and in their stead, two recently released jailbirds named Paul and Lester hop on board. At first glance, Paul and Lester seem cold and indifferent, since Maria and Creston are not yet proficient in English. John takes it upon himself to show them the house he's prepared for their new life. He ensures Creston feels at ease. Later, as they share a drink together, one of the newcomers offers a drink to Marie, encouraging her to partake. Initially hesitant, Maria declines, but John persuades her to relax and take a sip. John also shares information about his wife and son, despite the language barrier, and answers the newcomer's inquiries. However, an unsettling atmosphere begins to pervade as the two strangers cast strange glances toward Marie. When John asks Paul to cease his behavior, Paul feels threatened. Suddenly, Lester brandishes a firearm, aiming it at John's face. Simultaneously, Paul pulls Marie onto his lap, taunting John and claiming he is powerless to intervene. Seeing an opportunity, John swiftly disarms Lester while drawing his own weapon. He instructs Creston to seize Lester's firearm, but Lester grabs Creston, holding a knife close to the boy. Paul, meanwhile, produces two more guns, escalating the tension. He gives John a mere 5 seconds to leave. The stagecoach halted abruptly, leaving John with a dreadful choice: surrender his gun or risk harm to Creston and Marie. Left with no alternative, John reluctantly released his weapon, and Paul forcefully pushed him off the couch. But John's determination remained unbroken. He embarked on a relentless chase after the fleeing coach, even though he couldn't close the distance. Through the night, he ran tirelessly, the hours stretching out. Finally, John stumbled upon a modest shack, devoid of occupants. In the distance, he spotted a heart-wrenching sight. Creston's lifeless body sprawled on the ground. Tears welled up in John's eyes as he tenderly lifted his lifeless son and continued his somber journey. Eventually, he encountered the coach, where the driver and guard lay motionless. Gently, he set Creston down, then found a nearby firearm and cautiously approached the coach. Inside, he spotted one of the men and with precision dispatched Lester with a single fatal shot right between the eyes. Paul, in desperation, attempted to flee, pleading for mercy and claiming Marie was still alive. John remained silent, methodically emptying his weapon into Paul, ensuring no bullets remained. With Marie and Creston in tow, John made the arduous journey back to their home. Upon hearing the grim news, Peter rushed to John's side, standing by his brother and offering support during their shared grief. Unbeknownst to John, Paul was the brother of a notorious gang leader and landowner named Henry de la Rue. Upon learning of the incident, Henry and his small group of men rode into the quiet town of Black Creek. Mayor Keene tried to reassure Henry that no one in town had any involvement. The small town had nothing to do with Henry's men or his brother's deaths, but Henry paid no heed and entered to inspect the bodies. He demanded Sheriff Malik if they'd caught the killer. Sheriff Malik, trembling with fear, informed Henry that it wasn't anyone from their town, and they had no leads on the culprit. Henry, Greenlee by name, gave them a strict 2-hour deadline to deliver the killer alive. If they refused, he threatened to exact revenge on 2 townspeople, and if they still resisted, he pledged to personally end the lives of 4 individuals the following day at noon. Mayor Keene, under duress, chose 2 townsfolk, one an elderly woman who had accepted her fate, and the other a man without legs who pleaded desperately for his life. Without delay, Henry shot the begging man on the spot and proceeded to the old woman who cursed him before Henry ended her life without hesitation. Though Henry briefly paused, his thirst for revenge remained unquenched, and he shot another man point blank, lamenting that dealing with just an elderly woman and a disabled man didn't satisfy his thirst for vengeance. It was revealed that Black Creek had been paying Henry $80 for protection, but now he demanded $160 by the end of the month, leaving Mayor Keene pondering how to find the extra money. Henry buried Paul, and his widow Elaine, who couldn't speak, attended the funeral. He vowed revenge, but she simply sought peace and urged him to be silent. After burying his family, John and Peter brought their belongings to town for sale with the intention to leave. Peter visited the shop run by the old woman's grandson, Wojciech, who informed him of her passing. Peter, a hunter, wanted to sell some animal skins and suggested that their hunting skills could help protect the town from Henry's men. Wojciech accused him of cowardice for advising against picking unwinnable fights. John went to see Mayor Keene to sell his land, only to discover that he could fetch no more than $140, half of what he'd paid 6 years ago. Mayor Keene explained that due to Henry's extortionate fees, he couldn't offer more than $150. He hinted that things might improve if they could identify the person responsible for Henry's brother's death. It dawned on John that Paul was Henry's brother. Realizing the peril he was in, John reluctantly accepted the $150 and Mayor Keene discreetly warned him to hide the money in his boots to avoid being robbed. As John left, he found himself surrounded by armed men, who turned out to be townsfolk led by Sheriff Malik. Suddenly, Sheriff Malik shot John from his horse. Meanwhile, Henry and Madeline met with the Standard Atlantic Oil Company, and it was revealed that Mayor Keene was aiding Henry acquiring land in Black Creek and its nearby areas, known for its rich crude oil deposits. Henry learned that the oil company had intercepted a message from Sheriff Malik, seeking help in dealing with Henry. He reminded the company that he wasn't confronting Native Americans, and insisted that their actions align with the company's reputation. John found himself incarcerated in jail, and later, he was joined by Peter, who had been roughly handled and thrown into a cell by a group of men. Alone in their cell, John implored Sheriff Malik to release Peter, emphasizing his innocence. However, Malik was determined to make Peter pay for injuring his deputy during the capture. He had also alerted Henry about John's capture in the hope that it might spare their town. Malik acknowledged that Henry had once been a good man, but had grown cruel due to his actions against Native American tribes. He expressed regret for John's loss, and believed that if John had shown compassion to Henry's brother, it might have prevented a lot of trouble. Malik hoped that John's death would buy them some time until he could secure help from the federal government, unaware that his message had been intercepted. The following day, the townspeople assembled and forcibly removed John from jail. They subjected him to a beating before tossing him over a horse and riding off with him. No one dared to intervene or speak a word as they transported John to their hideout and secured him to a post. Henry and Madeline emerged to confront John, introducing him to Madeline as the man responsible for her husband's death. John, in turn, clarified that it was Paul who had taken his son's life and harmed his wife. However, Henry remained indifferent to John's pleas and grievances. Mayor Keene, eager to assess John's mettle, left him bound under the scorching sun. Shortly after, Peter discreetly executed Mayor Keene with a blade. Freeing John, Peter hoisted his weakened brother onto his shoulders. Their escape nearly met its demise when two guards neared, but Peter swiftly dispatched them with gunfire. As the remaining guards opened fire, Peter managed to flee with John on horseback. John, weakened and too heavy to carry alone, was left with a rifle and a promise of Peter's return, as his brother led their pursuers astray. Henry and his men, hot on their trail, followed Peter as long as they could. However, they eventually split up to pursue both Peter and John. Days later, John awoke to the sound of approaching horses. Thirsty and cautious, he took cover, gripping his rifle as Henry and his men rode by, dragging Peter's lifeless body behind them. Upon returning to his base, Henry discovered his men slaughtered and his money stolen. It was clear that Madeline had betrayed him. Madeline, on a train with a bag of cash, watched with relief as it started moving. Her respite was short-lived when she saw Henry's gang racing toward the train. The train came to a halt, and Madeline, armed, made her way to the rear car, but she found herself surrounded by Henry's men. Meanwhile, John wandered through the countryside and stumbled upon a small house owned by Mrs. Whistler, whose husband had fallen victim to Henry. Initially cautious, Mrs. Whistler realized John was merely seeking water, and she took him to the barn, offering food and water. She and her family were departing their home, and invited John to join, but he declined, needing to regain his strength for the task ahead. Henry's men returned Madeline to him, but she met him with defiance, even after he struck her. Henry intended to end her life, but permitted his gang to torment her first, ultimately ordering them to menace her with a blade at her throat. Once John had rested, he confronted Mayor Keene at his residence, holding the fearful man at gunpoint. He demanded his boots, the cash he'd taken, his deed, and an explanation for Keene's association with Henry. Realizing John's resolve, Keene was forced into a coffin he'd been crafting, where John left him to endure the blazing sun. Renewed and determined, John prepared to leave the town. However, Sheriff Malik and his men rode into town, passing by the lifeless gang members and Henry. Sheriff Malik expressed gratitude to John for ending their torment, but grew apprehensive upon seeing Madeline with him. Guns were drawn as they aimed at John, who warned the sheriff to depart to avoid a fate similar to Henry's. John and Madeline left the town together, and it was ultimately revealed that the oil company had assumed control of the town. In the end, the moral of the story was clear: never trifle with a man's boots or his money, as it could lead to a Wild West showdown.